Welcome back. Today we're really diving deep, not just into the usual, but into the things that completely throw us off course.
Yeah, the truly unexpected. We're getting into Nassim Nicholas Taleb's Black Swan Theory today.
Using the sources you've shared, including bits from La Teoría del Cisne Negro.
Right, and the mission here isn't just, defining it again. For those of you who follow this, we want to dig into why these events catch us so off guard.
And maybe touch on some core ideas like different kinds of randomness.
Exactly, and how Taleb suggests we can actually face this unpredictable future, maybe even benefit from it.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because, we're obsessed with predicting everything, right? Forecasts, data models.
Constantly trying to see what's next.
But Taleb's big question, and it's right there in the sources, is what about the really big stuff? The game changers that nobody sees coming?
The things that just don't fit the models.
Yeah. What if focusing on predicting the normal actually blinds us to what truly matters?
And that's the heart of the Black Swan idea, isn't it? The sources break it down into three key things.
Okay.
First, it's an outlier. It's just outside the realm of what we expect based on past experience. Nothing really points to it beforehand.
So it's rare, statistically speaking, based on what we usually track.
Right. Second, its impact is extreme. We're not talking small changes here.
No, like history-altering stuff. The internet, 9/11, the '08 crisis, maybe a pandemic.
Things that fundamentally shift the landscape. Yeah.
Okay, and the third part, this is the one that always gets me.
Ah, yes. The retrospective predictability. After it happens.
Suddenly, everyone has an explanation.
Exactly. We look back and construct a story that makes it seem like it was predictable all along. We rationalize it.
Which is kind of dangerous, right? Because we don't learn the real lesson.
Precisely. Instead of thinking, wow, prediction is really hard, maybe impossible for these things, we think, oh, we just missed the signs.
We convince ourselves we could have seen it.
Which sets us up to be blindsided again.
The sources mention the origin of the name itself, the
Yeah.
Black Swan discovery. That's such a great illustration.
It really is. Europeans were absolutely convinced for centuries all swans were white. Every single observation confirmed it.
It was just accepted fact.
Until explorers actually found black swans in Australia. Boom! One observation.
Shatters the whole worldview.
Yeah. It shows how our experience, our limited data, can just completely wall us off from what's actually possible out there.
And the sources stress this isn't just like finance or politics.
No, not at all. Technology, health, culture, even our own personal lives can have these black swan moments.
Which leads to the big question the sources tackle. If they're so impactful, why do we consistently miss them? It can't just be bad luck.
No, it points to something deeper. Flaws in how we think, how we approach risk.
How we build our systems, maybe.
Definitely. Taleb introduces this key distinction between what he calls mediocristan and extremistan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mediocristan.
Think of domains where things cluster around an average and extremes are rare and don't really change the big picture, like human height.
Right, there's an average height, variations exist,
Yeah.
but you don't get someone a mile tall throwing off the average completely.
Exactly. Normal distribution, bell curves. That world.
Got it. So, extremistan.
That's where the extremes dominate, where inequality is the norm. Think wealth distribution, book sales, market crashes, website hits.
Where one single event or data point can outweigh everything else combined.
Precisely. One bestseller, one huge market swing, one viral video changes everything. Averages mean very little there.
So, black swans live in extremistan.
They absolutely do. And here's the problem. We often use tools and models built for mediocristan tools based on averages, assuming extremes are just noise.
And we try to apply them to extremistan.
And it's worse than useless. It gives us this false confidence right where the biggest risks actually lie. We're blindfolded.
Wow, okay. So the tools are wrong for the job. But what about us, our own minds? The sources mention cognitive biases.
Oh, definitely. Our brains have built-in traps, like our tendency to rely heavily on past patterns. Naive empiricism, the sources might call it.
We expect the future to look like the past.
Yeah, we extrapolate. But a black swan, by definition, is something new, something outside that historical pattern, at least in our direct view.
So searching for patterns actually makes us miss the truly novel thing, like looking for white swans.
Exactly. We get tunnel vision, then there's the illusion of control. We build complex models, especially for things like the economy or markets.
And we start to believe we actually understand and can manage the risk.
Right. But those models are often based on normal conditions. They implicitly ignore the possibility of the extreme outlier, the black swan.
So they make us feel safe right when we're most vulnerable.
Precisely. And then the third bias, we talked about the narrative fallacy.
Our need to tell a story afterwards.
Yes, to make the chaotic seem orderly in hindsight. Oh, of course the signs were there.
It's comforting, I guess. Makes us feel like we understand.
It does, but it's a dangerous comfort because it stops us from acknowledging the fundamental uncertainty. It prevents us from preparing for the next unimaginable thing.
Okay, so if trying to predict these things is flawed, maybe even harmful, what's the alternative? Where do the sources say Taleb points us?
He shifts the focus entirely, away from prediction towards preparation, and this leads to his concept of anti-fragility.
Anti-fragility.
Right.
Not just being tough or resilient.
No, robustness is just resisting shocks. Fragile things break under pressure. Anti-fragile things, actually.
You benefit from shocks. From randomness, stress, volatility.
Exactly. They get stronger. Think of like the human immune system getting stronger after exposure or evolution driven by random stressors.
Okay, so how do we build that? What strategies do the sources suggest?
Well, one key idea is diversification, but maybe thought of differently. Not just spreading assets, but ensuring that a shock in one area doesn't wipe you out entirely.
Having options, different skills, maybe uncorrelated investments or business lines.
Right. Another is redundancy. Having backups, reserves, slack in the system.
Which often looks inefficient in normal times, right? Extra inventory, backup power.
Totally inefficient. Until the black swan hits a supply chain breaks, the power grid goes down. Then that redundancy is what saves you.
It's acknowledging that the unexpected will happen.
Yes. And finally, there's this idea of adaptive learning and keeping options open, being able to pivot quickly.
Seeing shocks not just as disasters, but as information. Opportunities.
Spot on. Learning from crises, trying small experiments with limited downside but potential huge upside. The sources mention how lean, adaptable startups often embody this more than big, rigid companies.
So thinking about the listener, this isn't just abstract theory. The sources want us to apply this.
Everywhere. Personally, it's about financial buffers, maybe not relying on a single income source, but also mental resilience.
Being able to handle uncertainty without falling apart.
Yeah. For businesses, it's flexible structures, decentralized decisions perhaps. Globally, it's thinking about infrastructure policies. Can they withstand shocks, not just perform well on average days?
So the big takeaway here, really pulling from the sources, is that the events that matter most are the ones we don't predict.
And our usual methods, our focus on the average, actually makes us more vulnerable to these extremes.
So the path forward isn't necessarily better crystal balls.
No. It's building ourselves, our businesses, our systems to be anti-fragile, to actually gain from the randomness that's inherent in the world, especially in extremistan.
There's that quote the sources attribute to Taleb.
El verdadero riesgo es lo que no ves venir. The true risk is what you don't see coming.
Powerful. And for anyone wanting to go deeper, the book recommended in the source material is El Cisne Negro, The Black Swan by Taleb from 2007.
Which leaves us with that final thought from the source. What's the next black swan?
Which, by definition, we can't know.
Right. But the real question for you, the listener, is how does thinking this way, embracing the limits of prediction, understanding extremes, aiming for anti-fragility, how does that change your approach?
How does it change how you prepare for a future that's guaranteed to have surprises?
Yeah. Maybe we could even explore specific ways to apply anti-fragility in, say, investing, or look at some critiques of the theory in a future deep dive.
Definitely food for thought. Fascinating stuff.